Who among us wasn't horrified to find out that there was a mass of plastic and garbage roughly the size of Texas floating around in the Pacific Ocean? Of course, none of us would have suspected that in the midst of all that trash, plastic and toxic waste, something even more sinister was brewing and coalescing. Something terrible was churning and bubbling beneath the surface in the guts of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Like a bowl of toads tossed into a witch's cauldron, the aquatic life was being slowly changed and broken down, then rebuilt again into something different. And I may be the only one on Earth who has seen it face to face and lived to tell about it. Pray that you never do. When I first found out about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, I did a lot of research. I watched videos of how it was affecting marine life and how turtles and fish were getting caught up in the stuff. I researched microbeads and PFAs, forever plastics that never disappear and can't be broken down, so they linger in our bodies and the bodies of animals, causing cancer and other issues. After I lost my job last year, I decided I wanted to help. I had a bit of money in my savings, and unemployment checks were coming in to help supplement my income. So I decided to take a break from the daily grind and go do something big to help the planet. Why would the generations after us have to clean up our mess? I thought. The least I could do was help. There were a number of potential organizations I could volunteer with, but I found one in particular that seemed to have a need for my skill set. I'd been diving since I was a teenager, so when I saw one group that needed a scuba diver for their plastic cleanup operation, I signed up right away. Months and months of training and hard work later, I found myself standing on the deck of a large vessel heading out towards the heart of the Pacific Ocean. I was one of only a few greenhorns, as they were calling us, who had never really been out on an operation of this magnitude. Another diver had been training me to do the sort of work that would be expected of us. His name was Bill, and he was a Navy vet who had been out multiple times doing similar cleanup jobs. Despite his hard gray eyes and stern gaze, I found out he was a pretty nice guy once you get to know him. The term teddy bear was used to describe him more than once, as if to alleviate my noticeable jitters, although I had yet to see that side of him. I got the feeling he could tear your heart out in an instant if you made a mistake that jeopardized someone's safety, so I was always on my toes around him. Once we get out there, I need you to listen to me closely, he was saying for the 4th or 5th time. Any miscommunication could be the difference between life and death. I know, Bill. Come on, man, you've told me this like 10 times. Just relax and let's enjoy the view. See the dolphins down there? The silver sheen of their dorsal fins could be seen breaking the surface of the water occasionally as they hopped on the waves along the bow. I was in the Navy, kid. I've seen a lot of dolphins, he said, his gaze telling me he was not impressed. Now, if you spot a sea lion, let me know. Seriously though, I'm just trying to make sure you get back safe, Jake. Just listen carefully when we're out there, okay? Watch for my hand signals. Do exactly what I say when I say it. Okay. Got it. I listened to him lecture for a little while longer, and then we went down to the galley for dinner. By morning, we would arrive at our destination, and the work would begin. What we didn't realize was that not all of us would make it back. Make or break time, Jake, Bill was saying as we prepared to drop backwards into the water from the dinghy. Our wetsuits were on and our scuba equipment had been checked and double-checked. The water looked dark, almost black, so far out in the depths of the Pacific. The grey overcast sky made it seem even more so. Nets were being drawn across the vast stretch that would capture plastic and garbage, but only at the top few feet of the water level. Below that, the fish and other aquatic life would easily be able to escape beneath. The system had been devised so that no marine creatures would be killed or injured by the nets. Our job was to ensure that it was working as it had been designed to function. Okay, 3, 2, 1, dive, Bill said. And we dropped backwards into the water. I was slightly nervous, but also excited as we dropped below the surface and got our first look around. Our equipment was designed to prevent any of the microplastics or other contaminants into our equipment. But there was still a risk diving into the water out there. Who knew what nasty shit could be floating in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch after all? We would find out soon enough. The huge nets were slowly drawn around the chosen area, creating a loop. The nets tightened, bringing debris together in a circle so it could be pulled up into the boats. As we watched from beneath the surface, we were told to try and monitor for wildlife getting caught up in the nets, in an attempt to free these creatures if possible. I saw a sea tortoise get stuck at one point and untangled it with an effort from the nets, setting it free. It swam away without looking back. The technology worked as efficiently as could be expected, and pretty soon, everything began to coalesce into a central area called the collection zone. And there the nets converged into a sock shape so that the debris could be brought up onto the boats. I stayed toward the periphery, careful not to get caught up in the closing loop of the inner nets near the collection zone. Suddenly, I noticed something in the netting around me. A strange-looking creature, like a black worm of some kind, I thought at first. But then, I saw it was bisected in places and split like branches on a tree. But the tree branch things were moving. They were moving towards me. I realized suddenly that this creature was closing in on me, and it was made of many legs and crooked appendages. Spindly, thin, knobby long legs. They were so strange looking, I had mistaken them at first for oils like seaweed or some other sort of debris. I tried to hand signal Bill, but he didn't notice me at first. He was close enough to me that I could just swim over and tap his shoulder. He was maybe 20 feet away from me. Kicking my legs, I began heading over in his direction. Then suddenly, I felt something grab onto me. Something thin and vine-like wrapped around my thigh like a whip, and digging into my flesh and causing me to cry out in pain. The regulator slipping from my mouth, causing the disgusting garbage water to flow in for a moment as I howled in pain. Quickly, I shoved the regulator back into my mouth and took a deep, grateful breath of air. Looking down at my leg, it took a moment to see what was causing the sudden discomfort. It was one of those strange, spindly black legs, I realized. It looked like something from a massive alien spider, intersected with knobby bits. It extended back into the midst of the trash patch, where more of it could be seen here and there. Then, suddenly, it began to pull me in. I felt like a great fish being reeled in, pulled in the opposite direction that the nets were going. Grabbing desperately for anything nearby, I stuck my finger through the net that had been collecting the garbage. It was sturdy. Being drawn in by the trawlers on the surface, there was a moment of give. But then I felt myself being pulled in two different directions by unstoppable forces. Above, the boats were reeling in the net, and below, this thing, whatever it was pulling me toward it into the depths of the ocean, away from the crew. Fighting back a scream once more, my mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. I tried to telepathically call out to Bill, yelling but unable to loudly vocalize it on the water. "Bill, help!" My muffled screams became a gargled, bubbling jumble. Once again, he didn't turn around. Despite all his talk of looking out for me in the dangers beneath the surface of the ocean, he hadn't looked in my direction for a good couple of minutes. He looked busy, fiddling with something stuck in the netting. A fish, I realized. The son of a bitch was more concerned with a damn fish than saving my life. I screamed again, this time louder into the water. It went unheard, muffled by the rocking motions of the waves and the clunk of the nets full of trash. I had a knife in my pocket, so I reached down and grabbed it, wincing at the pain and looking up desperately to see if Bill had noticed me struggling yet. He hadn't. My hand dove down to my leg, and with the serrated knife, I began to saw at the wiry tentacle arm which held me. It felt like I was trying to cut into a steel cable. It only tightened further until my leg felt like it would be squeezed from my body. Holding onto the netting, I began to feel my fingers slipping. Desperately, I clung to it with every ounce of strength I had. The thing pulling me was so strong. More of the tentacle arms were slowly finger-walking towards me. coming from a singular direction, I realized. Then, I saw what was at the center of it. A giant, black, spider-like creature was slowly making a course through the trash, heading in my direction. Unlike an ordinary spider, this creature was massive and had a countless multitude of long, spindly legs. It strode along the surface of the net towards me, and I saw it was made up of those individual strands like oily vines. It was as if this creature was a scribbled monster drawn in black marker by an angry child. It made no sense and hurt my brain just to look at it. Panicking, I tried desperately to unwrap it from my leg, using the knife to try to dig between the layers of it coiled around my thigh. It was unyielding and impossible to dig past the surface, or to even get a millimeter of give to try and unwrap it. The thing felt like a steel coil as it squeezed and bit into my flesh through the wetsuit. I screamed again, this time not for help, but out of sheer agony, the pitch of it rising and rising as the regulator fell out of my mouth yet again. This time though, it wasn't an accident. The coiling black vines grabbed the mouthpiece and pulled it away from me, out of my grasp, yanking the hose free from the air tank with unbelievable force. The spider creature was getting closer, now dropping down beneath me. Desperately, I tried to swim to the surface, no longer thinking, just panicking and screaming as the thing wrapped tighter and tighter around my thigh. Bill was suddenly there below me, I realized with a moment of relief. He immediately began to pull on the tentacle leg, dragging me down from below, trying to create slack so I could try to unravel myself. It worked. With the sudden break in the creature's strong grasp, I managed to pry the coiled length of it from my leg with the knife, and felt a rush of blood and oxygen go through my limb as it throbbed and prickled with pins and needles. After a few moments of desperately unwinding and unraveling it from my leg, I was finally free. But Bill was another story. Right after he freed me, the thing wrapped itself around him, like a huge squid with a fish for a meal. It embraced him with 1,000 arms, dragging him downward with the black, oily tentacles. His white eyes looked terrified, and I heard his screams cut through the water and rise bubbling up to my ears. I tried to swim down to Bill, but he was suddenly too far below me to see clearly. He was disappearing into the black depths of the ocean, I realized, my heart beating faster with fear. The appendages, which had been slowly maneuvering towards me, began to head towards the new target instead. The one down below. Bill. The poor man was being dragged down to the dark blackness of the ocean. Kicking with my flippers, I raced down to try to save him. I managed to descend with an effort for a few moments, but then quickly lost sight of him. And more importantly, I lost my nerve. With no air and no sight of him, I had no hope of catching him. Not to mention, there was no way I could fight that creature by myself. Suddenly, the imperative need for air hit me, and I began to swim up towards the surface. Tentacles of the creature were connecting it from the dark depths to the garbage patch, as if feeding off of it, taking nourishment from the poisonous mass. Bill could hold his breath for a long time. Perhaps we can still find him, I thought to myself foolishly. Even by then I knew. He was a goner. I swam back to the surface and took a gasping breath of air, calling for help, as I still felt terrified of the black tendrils floating nearby. Now I knew how quickly it could move and how strong it truly was. I was more afraid than ever in my life as I thrashed and screamed at the surface, calling out for help. By the time the boat got close enough to pull me in, it was far too late for Bill. The official cause of death was ruled a diving accident, but I knew the truth. My attempt to tell others what had really happened were met with ridicule and remarks on how I hadn't been prepared enough, and people seemed to blame me for the accident. Someone told the investigators that the last thing they had seen was Bill swimming towards me, as it looked as if I had gotten tangled up in the netting somehow. The whole thing came out making it look like Bill had somehow lost his life as a result of my incompetence. No matter what I say, nobody listens to me. But I need to get this out to the world. I need everyone to understand. There's something sinister living in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, feeding off the toxins and the deadly plastics, taking nourishment from the things which make us sick. And whatever it is, it's getting bigger